Welcome back and hello to another English podcast with Paul. In this episode, we're talking about public speaking. Now, as you know, I'm not an expert in public speaking, but I've done a few speeches myself, and I'd like to try and give you a guide. Okay, this is not exhaustive, this is not like complete comprehensive, but this is just a guide. And I've tried a course, so hopefully I could give you a little bit of insight into speaking English. Now, right now I'm outside enjoying the sunshine and listening to the birds, but just across the way there's a path, so hopefully we won't get disturbed with people walking their dogs and things like that. But as I've said before, this is unedited, unscripted, although I have notes, and natural conversation. So this is real and this is live, so bear with me as we try to get across what I want to say and hopefully give you some value that you'll enjoy. Alright, so without further ado, let's get into it, let's crack on and make a start. Alright, so I've broken it down into sort of 4 sections really: when, how, what, and subtleties. Alright, so that's how I'll try and put it across to you in bite-sizable chunks or chapters, if you will. Alright, okay, so when might you need to speak publicly? Now, I never thought I would want to speak publicly. It's kind of brings fear up in a lot of people and also myself, being a human being as well. So that fear I wanted to try and conquer. I wanted to try and work out why I was so nervous and scared when I was asked to speak publicly. And this is what made me focus and trying to learn and to build on that. And I've done a few other public speaking since and found it so much more valuable and so much more enjoyable after learning and practicing and taking the time to grow in my public speaking. Feel free to mention in the comments if my public speaking is terrible. Alright, okay, so meetings, internal meetings. You may be asked to speak in front of a small group of people. Maybe it's like the morning handover. Maybe it's just a pep talk. Maybe it's some information that's been handed down from above and you're the current supervisor for that team, and you've been asked to address a group of people and give this information across. So internal meetings, small meetings, and then later on you may get a lot more confidence and be a lot further in your career or happy to give maybe a public address externally. Maybe there's just a gathering, maybe there's an open day, maybe there's something that you've been asked to mention in public outside for other people to hear. That's another possibility. Or maybe even a press conference. Maybe you've been asked to be the spokesperson for your company. Maybe you're a sports individual and you've been asked to give a few words to the local press. Maybe there's TV cameras there and you're worried about how you're going to come across. Maybe it's a job interview where they've asked you to give a presentation and there's maybe 5 people in the room. I've had to do that, and believe me, at the beginning it's very, very scary. Maybe it's an interview or TV for TV or for YouTube, for example, in regards that you're an expert in a particular area and somebody wants to pick your brains and ask you questions about a particular subject for their channel. Maybe it's just a radio interview. Maybe it's just a conversation on the radio, a relaxed, informal affair where it's just a conversation that's recorded for maybe a podcast or radio, something like that. Maybe it's a funeral and you've been asked to share a few words, or you feel that you want to share a few words. You know, As we get older, people do die, and sometimes we feel compelled, because we have a lot of connection with that person, to say some words on how they've helped your life, or shared, or been part of your life. So even at a funeral, saying a few words can be difficult, because you have the added pressure of the emotions brought up by the funeral, and the fact that you've lost an individual. Likewise, a wedding, lots of exuberant people, alcohol flowing. It can be a little bit challenging to give address to maybe an audience that doesn't want to be there, or might not want to listen to you. So giving conversation or a speech to drunken people, shouting, and hecklers is something else, again, challenging, that you'd have to learn to overcome. Or it could be a class assignment. It could be an award ceremony, or it could be just a social gathering in a bar with some friends, and you want to make a little toast. And you don't want to come across as an idiot, and getting all muddled with your words and things like this. So there's lots of different occasions that public speaking can come up, and can really help you as an individual to challenge yourself, to grow, and maybe even help your career and the way people perceive you as an individual. It can really make a big difference. All right, there are obviously other opportunities and times where you might have to give a speech as well. All right, so moving on. How? So this is just going to be a brief overview, and then I'll get into the principles of it, and then we'll talk about maybe some subtleties to fettle, to the finer points, to make your speech, your talk, a little bit nicer, a little bit more professional, a little bit smoother, a bit easier for people to swallow, so to speak. All right, so how? Now, you could do a course. Now, that's a really good idea, because it's set in chunks, and you might have to pass one part before going on to the next part, and it helps you get through the theory, the knowledge, the understanding, and the building blocks in sections. So that can really help doing a course. You could also write down some of the chapter headings and some of the steps that is offered in a course. You could like screenshot them and photograph them, and then make your own course, do it yourself. And with that, then you could practice and record yourself, so you can see the different parts that you want to break down and build upon. So you might do, say, 10 videos recording yourself to get better and better and better, and take notes each time and make an effort to improve. Okay. You could do a mock interviews in front of your friends, or mock speeches in front of your friends or family, somebody you trust, to give you some good critical feedback, so you can write down and grow and change and alter. So doing mock in front of friends and family can help if that's where you want to go. Another thing is observing other people giving speeches. You know, there's quite an array of different people giving speeches out there all the time, whether it's for, I don't know, a sports interview. Maybe after a football match, there may be one footballer explaining why they did this. Maybe after a boxing match, explaining the individual what he wanted to do and how he got it done and how he overcome those challenges. So observing others is a really good way to spot the things that you would improve, or the things that you need to be aware of when you're giving your talk. Another aspect would be finding your own style. Now, like a lot of artists, it's good to copy other people, and out of that comes the authenticity of your own style. So learning lots of different people's or lots of different ways to give a talk, and then finding your own out of that. Because copying other people make you actually learn and focus on what each one of those is doing. All right. Like I said about improving, so recording is a really, really fundamental way of growing and documenting how you progress and being able to observe or listen and see how you are getting better and what areas you want to continue to improve and learn more about, because we are only human. A mentor is also a good idea. Instead of going on an instructor's course, you could have a one-to-one. Maybe you can have an instructor or a mentor that would also help you observe and see things quicker, so you could get from A to B sooner, especially if you're under a time restraint. Maybe somebody's asked you to give a speech at their wedding and it's in 2 months' time. So maybe an instructor or a mentor may help in that time frame and paying for their expertise to learn stuff much quicker. The other thing is time. Like a lot of skills, you might understand the theory, you might have digested the information, and you might have a good understanding, but until you actually do it, it's going to take time to build upon those automatic responses, that automatic habits. There's a famous story that a potter had lots of students, and he separated the students into two halves in the class. And the first half had to do one piece of pottery to be graded on at the end of term. And that one piece of pottery had to be perfect, absolutely immaculate, amazing, best piece of work they could possibly do. So half the students had to do that and then show their results or show their piece at the final, as the exam at the final of the term. The other half was told that they had to complete 100 pieces of pottery. Doesn't matter how good, you had to do 100 of them, no matter what. By the end of the exam, you had to have made 100. Now, as you could probably guess, the group that did 100 was far, far better in passing the exams. And those that had to do one piece, often some of them didn't even hand in one piece because of procrastination. And there's another term, procrastination paralysis, when you've got too much choice, too much opportunity, too much to think about, where you don't even actually get started because you're overwhelmed by the task at hand. So bear those things in mind. Things will take time, and you will be bad to start with. It takes time and time and time. If you go back and look at some of my videos at the beginning when I started and just listen to them, I'm sure some of them are terrible, made lots of mistakes, but just kept going and going and going. And it's the same when you learn a language. You will get teased. You will get mocked. When I go to a foreign country and I try to speak their language, 99% of the time, the local person will laugh at me and be humorous and jostling and animated with happiness and excitement. Yes, they're happy I tried, but they enjoy laughing at me, which is fine. That's part of learning. All right, so you have to do lots of bad ones before you get good. Hence why I say about the time. Now, the last part in this chapter or section would be principles. Understanding the principles behind how and why you're improving. What there is to categorize in terms of departments of speaking. All right, so let's move on to that next part. Okay. So this next part, what are the principles? Okay, so like I said, this is not an exhaustive list. You can add some, you can take some away, and I'm sure if you Google it, you will find even more parts of the principles. Okay, so I don't want this to waffle on too much, and that's one of the points, not to waffle on. All right, okay, so first of all, know your subject. Now, if you know your subject inside out, you can talk about it for hours. You're passionate about it, you're excited, and you know a lot about it. So know your subject really, really well. If you've been asked And this is what I did on the course. I was asked to write a speech and then give the speech on a topic I knew nothing about. And this happened multiple times. So you learn how to get the best out of the subject and how to find where you're passionate about the subject and then deliver that in a way that others kind of feel your enjoyment and your passion. So as I get more passionate, I talk faster and I talk louder sometimes, and I get closer to the camera and closer to the microphone because I'm getting more and more engaged and passionate. Okay, know your audience. That might sound silly, but there's a real big difference between discussing a 10, 15, 20-minute subject with children from school at, say, 8, 9 years old, or dealing with parents and adults of, in their 30s and 40s and 50s. Okay, you've got a very, very different audience and mentality and patience level. So know your audience. Some of it becomes obvious, and I could go into more detail, but we need to keep this short and concise, which I'll get back to in a minute. Rehearse for the time frame. So normally when you're asked to do a speech, you'd want to know how long is the speech, who is the audience, where is it going to be, and things like that. We'll cover some more in a moment. All right, so rehearse for the time frame. And I also recommend recording it as well. All right, projection and volume. Now this often comes down to where you are, whether it's a really big hall, whether you're in a pub, or whether you're at a funeral. It really matters where you are about how much you need to project. Now there's a whole discussion and topic and theory and videos just how to project your voice from your diaphragm and breathing techniques. Again, another very good subject. Moving on to breathing. It sounds stupid, but learning how to breathe and to breathe through your nose and breathe in through your lungs and like really try to engage your core can help you speak for maybe a long sentence or a long paragraph without having to stop to take a breather in the middle of it and sound exacerbated. So that is an important aspect to bear in mind. Much like this next one, or the next few, which can be brought together, is body language. So depending on how much you are animated, which again we'll move on to, how much you engage with eye contact with your audience, looking closely, maybe picking out a few people, moving from left to right, maybe looking at the back, moving your body language, your eye contact. Excuse me, I was about to burp. And also what you're thinking. And then going back to waffling, how waffling can really lose an audience. But if you're connecting with some eye contact, and if you're moving around or moving your perspective, your point of view of who you're looking at in the room, and being aware of how large or small your audience is, can really make a difference in your authenticity. All right. And that moves on with volume and the projection, but also in pacing. So if you're talking about people in a funeral, you may want to wish to speak in somber tones, calmer, quieter, gentler. But then if you're talking about a wedding and the stag do and all the exciting things that happened between you and your friend before he got married, and oh my God, how he was, and he got drunk and all his secrets, then you might get faster and faster and more animated. So keeping your audience engaged is important, to know the audience and to know your subject, but bringing in this authenticity with pacing. So you get faster or you get slower and softer and quieter, or louder and more excited, depending on the subject. Now, like I said about waffle, part of when you write the speech is to minimize the waffle, because people switch off, they disengage, and they don't want to hear anymore. Waffling is a term or a phrase that just means speaking about lots and lots of things that are not important to the point, not important to the story, not important to the subject. Now, this is why it's very good to bring in a story. Like I said about the teacher with the potters. And if you start with a story, as many good speakers do, it brings the audience in. They're like, oh, I want to know what happens at the end of the story. So having a story is a really good way of helping to minimize the waffle, bringing something concise and wrapping it up in a nice deliverable package. So you might start with an opening. You might start with a bit of validity of who you are and why you've got this knowledge. So for example, if it was a wedding speech, you might say, John and I, we go back, way back. We were friends at college. We were friends in primary school. I know about his family, his mum. I know about his girlfriends. Oh my goodness, the stories I could tell you about John. So that gives you validity, like authority of knowing the subject. So having authority at the beginning, and then maybe a story, and then maybe having some emotional connection. Maybe something very, very bad happened and how John overcome the adversity. So you might start saying that you knew John for so many years, and then you knew that John had a real bad problem that he had to get over. I don't know, he wasn't able to get into the army, for example, because of medical reasons. And then eventually he was able to overcome that and have a new perspective of being connected to the scouts or the army cadets. And now he's raised up through there. And now he's able to help hundreds of children. And that's how he met his wife, through the scouts or through the army cadets. And that's how we come full circle about how now John is expecting his own children. And so you bring the audience through on a roller coaster of emotions and ups and downs and adversity, because that's how we connect. We connect through authenticity, and part of authenticity is what happens in our own lives, and we all experience trauma, loss and adversity. So we're able to connect with somebody once we know they're also vulnerable. They're not this superhuman, amazing person that everything goes perfectly, swimming smoothly in their life. Knowing that people had things to overcome, adversity to overcome, makes you connected to them a little bit more. You can see them as human. You can appreciate that they've had to go through the same terrible things in life that you have. So bringing the story, bringing it concise, up and down roller coaster, connecting, and then you finish with your conclusion. Now, normally you would have a brief recap. So I would say, the things we've covered, the parts we've moved on to. And then you would finish normally with a call to action, CTA, a call to action. Okay, thank you very much, everybody. John's been great. We've enjoyed the wedding. Now I want you to raise your glasses in a toast to John and Mary. May they have more children and have a happy, long, marriage together. You can tell I haven't written this down. That I'm not writing a speech for John and Mary. But you get the point. You get the idea. All right, a call to action at the end. And so maybe you'll be aware and think about the call to action that I ask you, the listener, at the end of this video. Okay, now moving on to the final part, subtleties. How to refine and make your speech, your presentation, a little bit nicer. All right, fettling off those rough edges. All right, okay. So some things to bear in mind. Does moving around help you express yourself? Because I'm very expressive and I like to move around and focus and change and move about. So I like to be energetic. Standing still is difficult for me. So this might be a good opportunity to discuss or find out whether you've got a wireless microphone, which you'll see in some of my earlier videos I've used, or a wired microphone. Here I have a wired microphone. Now, I believe because I like to move around and I like to move my head, I know I need to move the microphone as well. Not so much with the wireless one, but this one is much more reliable. It's a good quality sound. It's much more reliable, and you can see I've got, if you can see, if you're watching, a foam cover. Now on the wireless ones, I had a little thing called a dead cat. Now that's got lots of fur on it to help minimize wind. Without the cover, you would hear a lot more rustling of wind. But today is a beautiful, calm day. Many times I do my videos, it's quite windy and I'm out in nature. So another thing you can hear sometimes is the rustling of my beard. And if I wear a wireless one, sometimes when I move my head around, you can hear it rustling against my beard. Like this. So wired and wireless microphone makes a big difference on who you are as a person. If you like to move around, whether you like to stay still, whether you want to hold on to a microphone and move the microphone along with your head. Because if you're standing at a podium, there is another name for it, forgive me, I forget. If you're standing at a podium and you look back to mention somebody in the audience or somebody across somewhere else, they're not going to hear you when you look away. They'll be like, oh, and yeah. and then people go, don't, he forgot the microphone. All right, so wireless and wired microphones. All right, the next thing is appearance. Does the appearance help confirm your authenticity? So if you're a doctor and you're on stage in front of, say, 1,000 people, but you're wearing scruffy clothes like me, like you live in the woods, you know, that may not help people get the authentic connection. Where on the other hand, if you're a businessman wearing a business suit and you're trying to talk about nature and being outside and being maybe active and adventurous, but you're wearing a suit, that might not come across as authentic. Now, the key indicators for authenticity are children and animals. So I gave a speech in a classroom. Well, it was more of a small hall. And unfortunately, not only did I have children, which have a very, very short attention span, but I had a lot of parents and teachers also watching, which made me very, very nervous because I've got two audience age groups. Luckily for me, I ignored the parents because this was for me to engage with the children. They were the subject. They were my audience. And so I was very engaged with the children and we had lots of laughs. And ironically, it wasn't a problem, but we ran over time. We went for about half an hour instead of 15 minutes, which is terrible in most situations when you're asked to give a 15-minute speech. But luckily for me, this was a very low-key affair. It was very much a relaxed enjoy and, you know, spend time engaging with the children. So again, that comes down to timing of rehearsing and timing to the what you've been asked to do, the deliverables. All right, okay. Props. Some people like to bring in a slideshow and click the button and go through it and engage with it. Now, I would normally not recommend having a slideshow. For one, sometimes there is technical difficulties, power outage, the laptop doesn't work, the overhead projector or whatever they were supplying doesn't work, has been taken away, and you're sort of left high and dry. So if you really need something, I would say have it physically with you. so there could be no issues and problems. Have it literally with you, and you could flip the chart, you could write on the chart, or the images, for example. But images, especially if they're funny or have animals in them, are much more easy for people to engage with, because they're able to take your eyes off of you and sort of zone out of listening to your voice all the time. Sometimes, even myself, my voice becomes kind of monotone and droning on and on and on and on and on and on. But if there's a funny picture that pops up behind you and you kind of forget it's there, and you look back and then you sort of giggle as well with the audience, that creates a little bit more emotion and tension and humor, which is the next part I'm going to move on to. Now, not everybody is naturally funny. Not everybody wants to write gags and jokes within their speech. A lot of the time it's not called for, it's not necessary. But if you're authentic with your humor and your laughter, then that comes across as well, especially if you ponder and take a moment sometimes to giggle, or gently laugh about remembering something, or like I said, a picture that comes up. Again, that adds to the authenticity and for people to engage. Okay, pausing. They call it a pregnant pause when you stop for a moment. This is ideal in job interviews. When they ask you a question, you say, "Oh, good question. Hang on one sec." And you take a drink of water. That's a good time to allow your brain to catch up and think about what you want to say next. So having a bottle of water or drink with you is a good time to not just give yourself some fluids, because your mouth does become dry when you're speaking, because you're breathing out air and the moisture from your mouth. Having a moment to drink some water can be really, really helpful. Gather your thoughts, calm down, and allow that pregnant pause. I don't know why they call it a pregnant pause, but it's a moment. You can also redirect. Sometimes you might want to say, and if you will look over here to my friend John, he's wearing that tie and that silly hat. He really, really helped me to do X, Y, and Z. And you might pause whilst you're pointing at your friend John. So the audience all look over to where you're pointing. Again, gives you a few seconds to recalibrate, maybe have a drink of water, maybe just gather your thoughts. But putting in those pauses is very, very helpful. Now, if you watch a speech of a president or of our royal family, you'll see that they speak incredibly slowly. So when I said about pacing earlier, the slower you talk and pace yourself, the more professional and confident you appear. Breaking things down, taking a moment to breathe, and just speaking with pauses, again brings the audience's ears back on track, because you're pausing just after something important was said. My friend John here, with the silly hat and tie, he was instrumental in my career growth, and I've got a lot to thank him for. So I really will, buy him a drink tonight and remind him that I am very grateful for my friend John with the silly hat and bow tie. Thank you, John. Thank you. People then come back to you and able to digest some of those important things you said, because often there's some really, really important information and you want to spread it out a little bit, because otherwise people are contemplating, digesting, percolating, thinking about those interesting things you've just said, and you're moving on already. So when you said something important that you want people to remember, pause. They're smart enough to know that they need to digest that information. You gotta give your audience the, I don't know the right word, but the appreciation that they are intellectually aware and smart enough to understand these pauses and what you're trying to deliver. Okay, animation. So I briefly mentioned about animation earlier, about moving around on stage or in front of other people. Not everybody is really, really animated. Maybe like Jim Carrey. Some people are much more somber and calm. Maybe like Jordan Peterson. But it's more about finding your own style, how you like to express yourself. They say people that use their hands, especially leaders that put their hands in this power pose where you put your fingertips together and you kind of make a triangle and get some air inside it, the power pose. That is one way of stopping yourself from fidgeting. And again, like I said, it gives the appearance of control and power and calmness and professionalism. So if you're animated like me, then you might want to go back to that sometimes to control your fidget, your movement, and to recenter you. Then again, if your audience is young and you're animated and you're excited and you want to get some excitement into your audience, then you may well want to gesticulate your hands and your arms and move around and maybe use your whole body, whether you're moving your hips or your back to the audience for part of a gag or for other aspects. I was going to say a phrase then, for other comedic effect. Might not be comedic effect, it might just be an effect. Maybe gathering some pause, maybe you're gathering a prop. But using your whole body can really engage the audience again and allow them to take your eyes off of your face for a moment. Give them a pause. Connection. Okay, moving on. Connection. That emotion and that authenticity. If you're also emotionally involved as well, again, you would see this at a funeral or at a wedding. That's where emotions are high. But if you're just giving a speech about maybe a product, it can be very difficult to put emotion in, especially authentic emotion. Now that's where knowing your subject and potentially using and owning and liking that product or that subject. Maybe it's some online application that you use a lot. You can still become passionate about it because you can tell them what you think and what you feel. It saved me hours and hours of time when I thought I was going to lose everything on that memory card. Oh my God, my blood drained from my face. I felt faint. Just for a few seconds, I felt faint. I thought I lost everything. It was my photography from a wedding, and of course the do afterwards. This is a one-time deal, and I had it all on this memory card. And when it wouldn't work and my laptop wasn't working, oh my God, I thought I was gonna die. I wanted to crawl under a rock and just hide away. Getting across that emotion by how you feel, where you were, what happened, really adds to the authenticity, which allows your audience to be along with you on that ride, on that journey, and helps with the connection. So that links on to the next one of how you make them feel. So you might have this conversation for 5 minutes. You might have this for, I don't know, half hour. But people will forget. People move on with their lives. But what they won't forget is how you made them feel. If you made them feel happy, if you made them feel touched. It's about the feeling. Like if you think back now to some of your teachers at school, some of your professors at university, what you really, really remember is how you felt about that person. Were they passionate? Were they sincere? Did they help you out at a particular moment in your life? It's the feeling that you remember. So that's really about getting across your authenticity and your story and your connection. And it brings it all together. And so my conclusion, my recap, would be a brief summary of what we've spoken about. We spoke about when you might need to speak publicly, and all those important times that you may have to step up and be that person. So overcoming the nerves and overcoming the fear gap of not knowing how to give a speech. Then we looked at how, whether you want to do mock in front of your friends, breaking it down, going on a course or using a mentor, and understanding the principles. And then what to learn. We talked about the principles, about rehearsing, about knowing your audience, knowing your subject, the body language, the eye contact, the waffling, the story, the conclusion, and then the call to action. So now at the end of my conclusion, I call to action you. I'm going to ask you, the audience, my friends, please leave a comment below. Have you given a speech? Have you had to stand up in front of people? How did it make you feel? How did you prepare? Did you watch a video? Did you practice? Did you record yourself? Or did you just wing it? Are you that kind of person that just goes off the cuff and wing it? Let me know in the comments. I really want to know. Please tell me. And then also hit that like and subscribe button. Maybe if you found it useful, you could get somebody else to watch it. Maybe you just want to watch one of these other videos up here or up here. All right. Thank you very much for listening to the end. I appreciate you guys. I really do. And what a beautiful day. Thank you very much for listening. I'll catch you in the next one. Bye-bye.